Because I teach sewing and quilting, people assume that I sew all my clothes. Obviously, I sew, but I also enjoy shopping and buying clothes. Often I purchase a garment that has a unique style and later decide to add some of those details to one of my sewing projects. Or I've had the misfortune of getting a stain or tear on a favorite jacket and decided I'd really like another version. That's what happened with this jacket. I've enjoyed wearing it. It's a brown sweatshirt fleece jacket and wanted to try my hand at making another version, this time without the spot. It's a logical and creative process to trace off a pattern. I'd like to show you how. Copycat patterns. That's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
Creating a pattern from a ready-made garment is the reverse process of sewing. You're pulling off the pattern, so you have to think a little bit differently. When I initially purchased this jacket, I bought it because I love the style, the raw edges around the hem, the center front, the collar, the unique styling. And after laundering it, I was very dismayed when it discolored and one of the spots that I had in the jacket didn't wash out or dry out. So the alternative was to make another one. My misfortune from lemons to lemonade is that I'll be able to show you how you can do the same. If you have an element from your garments that you may have at home that you'd like to sew, I'll show you how to work with this. And then you can also personalize it. For example, I made this longer. I'm a little taller than average, so I lengthened it by 1 inch to 1 1/4 inches all the way around, and could change the different color schemes. This pattern also worked out well because it was simple, and I can show you the basic elements of copycat patterns. The tools that you need. First of all, a padded surface. You'll notice I'm not working on my elevated board. I have a surface that's a cardboard or foam core I've covered with fabric. You wouldn't necessarily have to cover it with fabric. I have it for contrast. Then you'd need paper, a roll of tissue paper, pattern paper. The choice is yours. You'll just use quite a bit of this. And then tools you might guess. Rulers, of gauges of all sizes and shapes. And most importantly, tracing wheels. Needle-pointed tracing wheel, a traditional one, or even a marker that just gives a straight edge. And you'll need pins, of course. And then the process of layering things together. I have my tissue paper. And on top of this, right side down, I have tracing paper. Many of you may use tracing paper for darts or tucks after you've cut out a pattern. Here you're going to use it to transfer the design, the shape of the pattern piece right onto the paper. Grain line is the first order of business, and I'm going to work with the front of this jacket. So I'll button the buttons. Excuse me, and we'll study this front. Now this front, when I can see the knitted fabric, it's all in the straight of grain right down the front of the jacket, so I know that this is the straight of grain. So the line that's marked on my tissue pattern is going to be where I'm going to align the jacket front. Place the tissue pattern, again, carbon side, or the tracing paper, carbon side down, just scant of that center front and pin to the padded surface. And then place the piece that you're going to be working with, aligning it with the center front line. And that padded surface is important because we can just pin in place. Now, in many instances, you will not be able to get the piece you're working with perfectly flat. You'll have to work with it section by section. This happens to be a fairly flat pattern piece. You can see in the shoulder area it has some shaping. So we're going to work from the center front, then work with the hemline area. And I'm also going to smooth this in the side seam area as far as possible, placing pins along until it starts to curve. And then I'll do some of my first tracings. Tracing wheel of your choice, I kind of like this one with the pin ends or very sharp ends, and start to trace the hem. Now if you wanted to lengthen the hem, you would do so at this point, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to carefully trace along the edge, this little inverted area for the vent in the lower edge, and then along the seam. And you should check to make certain that you're making marks through the fabric. But now as you get to this area of the jacket that doesn't lie flat because of the shaping, release some of the pins in the hem area, in the lower area. Just take them out so that you can do some moving and shaping of the jacket, still anchored a little bit at the front, and then work it flat. And again, you can see how this area here had to kind of move upward, but it's straight from the center front. Now, don't make something really complicated initially. Try this on a favorite top that you may want to remake, or a simple jacket such as this, and to check out these principles. Now, I had the remaining portion of the jacket flat, so now I'm going to trace this princess style seam and then the armhole, and if it gets really bulky, then just use the pins themselves as markers. Go through the seam line several times with the pin up and down. And it's maybe a little bit difficult for you to see, but I am just trying to work and mark the seam lines. And that tracing paper that's underneath will make a mark on the tissue paper. Each pattern piece will have its own details because this collar needs a little extra marking where the collar and the jacket front come together. So I'd mark a crosswise hatch. And then you could quickly, if you'd like, mark the buttonhole openings. Well, I'm going to speed along and remove this from the tissue paper. And you'll have to look twice to see what I have, but don't worry, we'll show you a darker version of this. But I have the tissue marking and going all around, which you might have a hard time seeing. So we'll make it easier. With a marker, I have darkened the edges and taken time to mark where I had the seam, all the buttonholes in all areas such as that. So, can't sew this without seam allowances. So we'll use a favorite marker that you may have and measuring tool, and we'll add 5/8 of an inch seam allowances along all the edges. And just quickly mark out using your favorite tool, whatever it may be. And I do like to use 5/8 just because it's what I've used for all these years, and add seam allowances. Now, if you remember for the original jacket, it did not have seam allowances at the front or the hemline, so I'm not going to be adding them in that area. In the curved areas, you may want to work with a ruler to help connect the dots. And you just keep adding these seam allowances and carefully working with whatever shape you have to add seam allowances all the way around the edges. And we'll work with the neckline, and you can see how you've pulled this off. Now, this is the first of many patterns we're going to work with today to show you some of the other significant areas and how to detail them. Next, I'm going to work with the back piece, and then we'll work with the collar and some of the others, so that you can see when you're copying a pattern, you pay attention to the grain line. You make certain that you, as close as possible, worked with the garment flat so that you could pull out the details. So soon I'll show you how to work with this technique on the other pattern pieces. I took a little time to transfer all the markings to a different color tissue paper so you can see more clearly that I'd be cutting 2 of the front. No seam allowances along the front, no seam allowances along the hem, but you can see where we have the seam allowances of the princess seam, the shoulder, armhole area, into the collar area, and also transferred the markings of the buttonholes. So it's a fairly fast process, but you just have to take your time and start with something simple. And with this jacket, The side panels, both the side front and the side back, are the next pieces that I would like to show you the tricks of tracing, following almost all the same techniques except the grain line. There has to be a grain line mark. There isn't a center front. So the pin marks are my attempt of marking just the straight of the fabric. You could mark the pins any place within that section. You just want to know where it is straight. So when working with this, I traced it off in the same manner, aligning the pins with the marking on the tissue paper so that I just traced these areas. And then the front and the side piece go together. Now you may want to pin these two pieces together, just kind of walk it through to make sure the lengths are approximate, that they meet. And you're going to take some time to do this so that, you're not going to rush through it, to make sure that after you've cut it out, it certainly will meet together. And I've done the same thing on the back side panel. The yellow pin heads are marking the straight of grain of that pattern piece. And here I have that pattern piece pulled off. Now when it comes to the back, it's marked we're going to mark the fold line, and that's what the long pins are marked, where I folded the fabric, stacking the stitching lines, and along that fold I place pins, so I know where to place it on my pattern, my tissue pattern, excuse me, and do the tracing. And I'll also have marked the fold of the collar. Now the back and the collar may not look all alike, but the tracing of it, the copycat pattern technique, is the same. So I'll remove the hanger, make it a little bit easier to work with, and I've worked with a long length of pattern tissue, folded the fabric, or I want to say fabric, but folded the paper in half, and then would place the tracing paper to scan to the fold line and pin it down. Now while you have it folded in half after it's cut out, you could have a full back piece, or you could just place the pattern on the fold. The choice will be yours. And lay this out. So I'm laying this out so that the center back pins are aligned with the fold of the paper. And I'll just double check underneath that everything is aligned and seems to be pretty well aligned. And the process will be much the same. Starting at the hem, I always find the grain, flatten out the hem, pin to the fabric, and as I'm pinning, make certain that there aren't any bubbles in the fabric, and find a tracing wheel. Under here someplace there's a tracing wheel, and then start drawing the hemline. Same process, only this time you can see we've worked with the fold, and go through this area and then release some pins if necessary to fold out the armhole, etc. Now, you're going to take, as I mentioned, you're going to take some time to do this, but here is your pattern piece magically produced, but it's placed on the fold if you want to keep it on the fold, and you have seam allowances added all the way around. Not hard at all. The collar is going to be next, and the collar, I'm going to have you study your pattern piece. This is a very casual jacket and not very fitted at all. On some jackets, blouses or tops that have collar pieces, it will have two pattern pieces, one for the undercollar and one for the upper collar. Now, on this one, the upper collar and the undercollar are cut the same. But on yours, if you are copying a specific collar, you may find that that undercollar is cut smaller, and when you study the grain line, it may be on the angle, on the bias. If that's the case, you'll have to trace off two collars. I would mark this on the fold, and you see I've already marked the fold, and then simply place this on the fold of the fabric and do the same tracings. And I'm just going to show this to you, how this has been traced. I didn't have any seam allowances. It's just placing this fabric flat. And I also marked, as I did on the front piece, where the collar and the jacket came together. It's a puzzle. You have to make certain that there are seam allowances so that the respective pieces can go together. But it's just looking at each piece at a time and kind of laying it out flat and releasing sections at a time as you need to. Now, when I first started doing this and I got to the sleeve, I had some issues, but now I've learned the tricks of the trade of in industry, how they copy the sleeve pattern, and I'd like to share that with you. This takes a little bit longer of process because the sleeve in the front is shaped differently than the back because the broadness in the back and the different shape in the front. So we need to make that change on the pattern piece, or allow it, not change it, just pick it up. Again, I have my tissue, this time folded in half. And you may notice that I've already pinned my sleeve. I have the underarm sleeve pinned together. And tracing paper would work here a little better. Let's lay that down first. So again, just placing it scant of the fold. So you see that there are some very common steps. Finding the grain line, which will be the fold of the fabric, the center fold. Now let me show you. Here's the cap and the underarm seam. And now I'll line this up. Line, starting from the hem, the edge of the fabric. And what I'm going to do, just so you can see this a little bit better, I'm going to flip this around so that you'll see the fold. We'll line this up so that the fold of the sleeve aligns with the fold of the tissue paper. And I'll also flatten it at the hem. And this is lining up here. But as I move up the sleeve, I can see the grain line, but also I can see that this is moving away from the fold because of the cap. It's moving away. And those of us who sew, and you're not going to do this unless you sew, know that when you set in a sleeve, there's ease. There's extra fullness. And that extra fullness will be evident as you smooth the sleeve flat. The sleeve will automatically fold away from the edge of the paper. The distance between the natural flow of the sleeve and the edge is the ease of the cap. So then I'm just going to pin that down and let it lie flat and do the tracing. Trace the hem, carefully trace the underarm area, going through all the areas, and then the armhole. Boy, there's a lot of fabric here. So what I find easier is just to use the pin point and work through this area. Just make marks. And I'm doing this rather quickly, and you would take a little bit more time and then connect it to the fold of the fabric. When I release this, I will have perfectly traced sleeve for the back, making this a mirror image, but a sleeve in the front will be shorter. So what I'd like to do, and I have some perforations along here that you can't see that well, but what I do have is one that's already been traced and seam allowance is added, but it's made for the back sleeve on both sides. So now I would flip this to the front after I've added the seam allowances and flip my sleeve, let me flip it this way, and place the jacket along the edge, marking at the seam allowances and at the hemline. And then I would do the same pinning in the sleeve front cap. And what happens is that you'll have to trim off. You'll find that this will be shortened by, a fourth of an inch, maybe a half of an inch in some areas. And then just trace the front half to make it smaller. This tissue has a little caved in area here and out in this area. And these are some of the basics of copycat patterns. There are an estimated 20 million quilt makers in the United States. We have our own language, acronyms, books, and websites. As my Nancy's Corner guest once wrote, it's a culture that's as foreign to the average male as sumo wrestling is to the average female. I'd like you to welcome Kent Williams, a writer and artist who entered the quilt world about 10 years ago. In a short tenure, he has developed a quilt style of his own and can talk the talk. Kent, when I go to quilt shows, I know that 99% of the people mulling around are female. And you've entered a world that is a little bit foreign to many guys.
Yeah, that's true, and it's sort of disappointing because I'd like to have more companionship, but also it's just kind of surprising that more men don't take to sewing. I mean, a sewing machine is a power tool. Men love power tools. You can hurt yourself with a sewing machine, so I don't understand why, more men aren't attracted to it, and I wish they were because it'd be nice to have the company.
And you're inspired by abstract lines, color, and let's have our viewers see one of your first quilts. The first quilt that we're going to show you is on light and darkness. And you can see a full view of this, and you have a lot of straight pieces.
Yeah, I tend to work with straight pieces, both because they're very easy to sew, and but also they give you a lot of manipulability. If you make the pieces small enough, you can cover a lot of territory over the course of a quilt.
What I'm impressed is that you use very small strips, about 1 inch you start off with, 1 inch strips.
Yeah,
give or take.
Yeah, and that's just to get as much done as I possibly can in the in the amount of space that you're given, the shape and size of a quilt. The more pieces, the more you can accomplish, in my opinion.
Just to look at your work close up, and you can see that Kent integrates light, darks, mediums, and what an interesting plan you have.
Yeah, it's a very simple quilt, really, structurally. Here's a piece right here, and here's a whole row. It's a gradated fabric, so it's going to get lighter as it goes down, and I just staggered those rows. So as you go across, it's just the same thing over and over again, but if you have small enough pieces, like I was talking about before, then you're going to get some nice effects because it's going to change a lot over the course of the quilt.
It has a lot of impact, just a lot. But then you've taken this basic linear look and you've done something that has a look of weaving. Yeah,
I'm interested in weaving textures. Maybe I should have just become a weaver, but it's hard to work with a loom. I'd much prefer to sew. I actually enjoy sewing. It's meditative, but I am attracted to weaving textures, and piecework, patchwork, lends itself to that. So.
And that Dreamweaver's quilt that we've looked at, you can see how the colors just work one inside each other and look like it's been woven.
Yeah, it does, and I think I'm in it because of the interaction of color. I just enjoy pushing some colors past some other colors because they react with each other, as you know, and you get a third color, when two colors go past each other, and so that's sort of what it's all about for me.
I find that interesting because color is sometimes hardest for people to incorporate. They use a lot of mediums, but you certainly have light, mediums, and darks incorporated. And then we're going to look at your quilt that has a spiral effect. We all gasped when this went up on the display wall because all made with the same strips.
Yeah, it's really not so different from this quilt that we were talking about before. It's just that I got out the ruler and started moving them around on an angle. It's all done with a ruler. Technologically, it's as simple as this quilt is. It just required a lot of measuring.
And you get little surprises because when you start blending colors.
Yeah, one of the joys for me is that it's not all pre-planned. I don't know what I've got sometimes until I lay it down on my floor, which is where I put mine. I don't have a design board. And so there's that first moment when you've had an idea, and like, well, yeah, how good an idea was that? And there it is on the floor, and you finally find out.
It was a good idea, let me tell you.
That one worked out all right. They don't always. And you can go back and change. You can substitute colors. If it's not right on the floor, then you make your adjustments. But.
And the last quilt we're going to look at of yours has a ribbon effect that is turning at right angles. Yeah,
I think I actually was playing with the ribbon that comes with a Christmas package, and I was folding it over. It's like, that's interesting. Because it was a different color on each side, and so when you folded it over, you got this effect that I liked, and I just took off from there and started running those things past each other.
And a little wider strips on this one.
A little wider strips because I was afraid it wasn't going to come through, and yeah.
Beautiful work, Kent, and thank you
you.
for sharing that with us on Sewing with Nancy. It's a pleasure, and you can go to the Sewing with Nancy website, click under Nancy's Corner in the 2400 series, and you'll be able to see Kent's description and get a contact to his website. Well, this wraps up our program, the first program of Copycat Patterns. We'll be back next time with another program on that topic. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.
Nancy has written a fully illustrated book entitled Copycat Patterns, which includes all the information from this two-part series. It's $14.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2405. Order item number BK2405, Copycat Patterns. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Classe Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.